Okay.
Good morning, Rachel. Welcome to One for the Road. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's a real joy to have you on. I've been reading up about you. I'm not stalking you. I've been reading all the wonderful things you've done in the music world,
Oh,
and it's amazing, honestly. And there's a couple of artists you've worked with that I want to talk to you about later. Uh,
okay.
but do you want to wind it back as we do and tell us what it's like for you growing up, and go from there?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on here, by the way.
Pleasure.
Um, I grew up in a sort of middle class house with my parents are musicians, like classical musicians in orchestras, and then they got divorced and married two other classical musicians in orchestras. So I was like surrounded musicians. Um, and yeah, I started playing the cello when I was 8. And I think it might have been my first addiction, to be honest. Like I was really, really obsessed with it. And it was a real way of me getting validation from other people.
Yeah.
Because the harder I worked and the more I could play, the more praise I got from my family and at school. I wasn't strong in certain areas at school. Like I'm terrible at maths, terrible at science, struggled in a lot of ways academically, but I sort of felt like I could win people round by playing the cello in assembly or something. And
Yeah.
then, it was like a currency of sort of being good enough in a
Yeah.
way. Um, but the other thing is that I just love music. I've always loved music. I've always loved listening to music. And I do wonder sometimes, I get a certain feeling from listening to certain things, and as a child, I would listen to that thing on repeat, on a loop. Um, and it's funny, I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD in the last year
There
or
you
so.
go. That'll be that then.
It's no rocket science. Yes, that was like rinsing all the dopamine out of
Yeah.
one tune. So I did that for years, and then when I was a little bit older, I started like playing with other musicians, like being in youth orchestras, and I got this sense of like community
Yeah.
and acceptance, and it gave me so much being a musician as a young person. And I just became obsessed with it really quickly, and I worked really hard. And I had some goals in mind. I wanted to be in the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain, and I did that when I was 14. And then I wanted to get a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music to study, and I got that when I was 18. Um, but as we'll talk about in the conversation, the wheels had started to come off my drinking by then. So
Right.
yeah, I've got my relationship with music is really it's kind of been alongside my addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So at school, did people accept you as well for being a musician? Because I don't know what schools you went to, but if I was playing the cello at 8, I would probably get bullied. So
Well, oh God, sorry, I got a nut stuck in my throat. Um, I I went to a girls' school, an independent girls' school, and I had a bursary. I'm so sorry, Dave. I've got a
it's all
cough.
right. Pause it. Pause it. We can start again. I'll
Okay.
go from I would have probably got bullied.
Okay, yeah. Perfect.
I would have probably got bullied.
Yeah. Yeah, I managed to escape that because I went to a very academic, I went to an independent girls' school, and we had a bursary because I was a musician. So I carried my cello on the bus every single day. So I did feel like a total geek, but I made up for it with Doc Martens and massive amounts of eyeliner, which is what I still
Uh,
do to this day, to try and sort of get some street cred back. But because I did sit every day, sit next to my cello on the bus, and I'd go
yeah.
to school, and I'd have already done about an hour's practice before I left the house. Then I'd get to school and I'd go into a big store cupboard in the music department and do another hour. And they used to let me skip assembly. And then I'd do another hour during the day and bring my, and I used to get really antsy if I hadn't done
Mm.
a wide amount of practice, because so much practicing has to happen if you're going to be a string player. It's insane.
I can imagine. It's and I'm smiling because of your obsessive behaviour. Uh, because a lot of us who have issues with the booze are like quite all or nothing, aren't we? So you
Definitely.
hooked into that at an early age, which probably tied in with your ADHD diagnosis, and that was recent. We'll talk about that
Yeah,
later.
yeah,
But
definitely. But also, it didn't feel that extreme because in the string playing world, that's what is required. Like most kids that I was in the National Youth Orchestra with, were doing 4 hours, 5 hours practice a day. You
mm,
know, like spending hours perfecting scales and major thirds, and it was like it's intense. It's a really
mm.
intense way of living. But yes, that definitely ticked a few ADHD addict boxes for
Yeah,
sure.
did you find you had a natural talent for it, or um, was it the practice that made you so good?
I think the practice at that point of my life was really important, and I still think that I fall back on the practice that I did then now. I think the thing that people picked up on was that is also to do with my alcoholism, which is like I feel everything all the time in a
Mm.
massive way. And I think if I've got one thing that I'm like proud of in my playing, which is hard even to say out loud, to like is that people feel things when I play stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, I think that's why I work now. That's why I've got a lot of work now. It's because like you can sort of hear things in the sound. And also the cello is unique. I mean, if you watch a film and someone falls in love or dies or has sex, there's quite
Mm.
often a cello solo in it because it's the closest instrument to the human voice in like physical terms. So it's really evocative, that sound. And I think I had like a natural kind of affinity with that.
I really get that. I worked for someone years ago, and they did the James Bond music, and put up the production and how it's all put together, and it's so
Yeah.
moving, isn't it? Like when you say, "I got goosebumps listening to that," and when I was in the peak of my addiction, I used to listen to Pink Floyd a lot. And there was a certain track on Division Bell album that I had my headphones on, and I
Mhm.
used to just lay there in a stupor, feeling
Mm.
sorry for myself. I repeat, repeat, repeat the same track, and now when I hear it, it's like I can really identify why I felt the way I did. You know,
Yes.
it really touched me
Mm.
in my soul, so I can really understand that. So
Yeah.
when did you start your
Drink.
first drinking? Yeah, when was that?
Oh, well, the first time I had a drink, I was probably, I don't remember it particularly. It was like in my teenage years. And I definitely, what I hadn't mentioned is that alongside all this cello playing, I had terrible anxiety and panic attacks growing up, like terrible. And I didn't really know where it came from, to be honest. But I had my first panic attack when I was 7, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really, really something. And I just felt like that. I hear a lot of alcoholics say this, like I was uncomfortable in my skin from when I
Mm,
was very small. And I was always looking for ways out of my body. Like my body was so uncomfortable. I think I somatized a lot of anxiety and sort of terror. I only know this because of the work I've done since I've been sober. But I felt extraordinary amounts of sort of terror, like existential terror as a kid. I don't really know why. Um, but so I'd always had this kind of anxiety and self-consciousness and just this feeling of wanting to escape myself. And then when I had a drink, I remember the relief of like not being in my body anymore. Even after like one drink, it was like being delivered from something. And it wasn't like a conscious thought, but I remember that feeling of like, that 3 drinks feeling of like being
yeah.
being inoculated against life and yourself and your thoughts. And I remember that, but I didn't like feeling out of control of myself. I didn't like the puking in the spinning rooms. So I was never sort of, it's weird, like I'll tell you the rest of my sort of alcoholism journey, but I was never someone that drank to blackout, really. I didn't like being sick, so I stopped before I was sick. I was very careful about what I drank. but alcohol from the very, very beginning for me was like a medical, it was
Yeah.
like a medical thing. Like I was medicating myself. And, you know, by the time I was at college, I had discovered at music college, so I was like 18 by then, I discovered that if I drank straight vodka out of a water bottle, I never had to have a panic attack. That's what it felt like. Like I would get these feelings sort of roaring up my esophagus of sort of anxiety and, you know, knots in my stomach, and my throat would close up. And then I would have like a bit of vodka, which is like, yeah, it just felt like medicine. Like I can
Mm.
still, you know, it's been a long time since I had a drink, and I can remember the feeling now of just being like milk of magnesia kind of thing, you know,
Mm.
just washing it all down. And when I discovered that that was a thing that I could do, I was like, oh, I've got it. Like this is how I'm gonna be in the world. This is how I'm going to be an adult. This is how I'm going to cope with my panic attacks. This is how I'm going to get on a tube. It's how I'm going to attend a lecture. It's how I'm going to go on stage, you know. And obviously, a lot of people take a long time to get to the straight vodka out of a water bottle stage of their drinking. You know, it takes a long time to get, but I started there. So I didn't have very far to fall, you
Yeah.
know. So by the time I was 23, I was wholly dependent on that vodka. I'd stopped playing the cello because it was too frightening and I was out of control of myself. And I felt like I did what a lot of alcoholics do, which is I blamed my environment, you know, the people in my life, the job I was doing, um, anything outside myself really that made me drink like that, rather than the other way around, if that makes any sense. You know, I
Mm.
didn't think, oh, the drinking's the problem. I thought the drinking is the solution and I
Yeah.
must keep going with the solution
Yeah.
at all costs, you know. And everyone that's telling me not to does not understand how I feel. They do not understand how bad it is in here, in my, you know, my body and my head. It's too awful.
Yeah.
And then of course I was, you know, that dependency led to DTs in the morning, round the clock drinking. My tolerance was all over the place. So sometimes I could drink a bottle of vodka and feel nothing, and then other times I could like have a glass of wine with dinner and be like absolutely pass out. Like I looked very different. I was like, you know, big bloated moon face, and I was a lot heavier than I am now. And I couldn't eat. I had constant gastro symptoms, and I genuinely thought that I could like, and if someone had said to me at that time, which people did, you must stop drinking, it was like they'd asked me to like scale Mount Everest. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't have done it. Um, but you know, so I felt very sorry for myself being 23, and you know, I am someone that went to abstinence-based 12-step recovery, and just saying, I'm Rachel, I'm an alcoholic, I felt like, I was like, how did this happen? You know,
Mm.
how on earth did this happen? I'm like 23. I went to the Royal Academy of Music, and then I went to the Royal Northern College of Music. I had all this promise in my career, and I was in church basements, like unable to stop drinking. I could not stop drinking. Um, and a bit of me didn't want to stop drinking because I couldn't cope with how I felt when I was sober for a long time.
Mm.
So it's funny, I haven't talked about it for a while, and when I remember it, it's like, God, it happened, it's like it happened to somebody else, but it was so dark, honestly.
Sounds really, really powerful.
Yeah.
Um, and that makes me remember my addiction, because I was vodka in the end, but you started in the beginning because you
Yeah.
found the magic tablet, didn't you? Like
Yeah.
you stumbled across it and thought, actually, your anxiety feels really, really unmanageable. And for you to find the solution, no wonder you got addicted to it,
Yes.
especially with your performing, the pre-show nerves, the building up. But as we know, alcohol escalates, so you start to rely on it more, our tolerance goes up. And then DTs in the morning, let's have a quickie, just calm the nerves down. Did it affect your performances like in a big way?
Well, I'd have said no at the time. I felt like I couldn't perform without it. And I remember doing like an access scheme when I was at college, where you audition as a student and you get to play with a professional orchestra. And I remember being in the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester playing Shostakovich Seventh Symphony with this amazing symphony orchestra, and having a bottle of water, you know, in inverted commas, by my feet. And I was like, well, thank God I've got that. Otherwise, I'd have walked off the stage with fear. You know,
Wow.
that's,
So it's debilitating anxiety.
oh my God, 100%. I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's not like that fear and that adrenaline, it's not like that's gone now. It's just that I was so frightened of it, I think, that I had to medicate it. And also, there's something about, like, if you're in a symphony orchestra full of people who are in their finery and everyone's very talented, everyone's done a lot of work to get there, the lights are on, it's a silent stage, it's silent in the auditorium, you've got loads of difficult notes in front of you. There's something uniquely fucking terrifying
Yeah.
about that. Even now, you know, and that's what I do for a living. Like, you know, there are still nights where I think, oh my God, I'd rather be doing anything. But
Really?
yeah, sometimes, yeah, like, if I'm honest about it, I mean, some days, and then some days I just feel nothing but joy and gratitude that I'm there and I'm sober. But the actual chemical process that happens with adrenaline and cortisol,
Mm.
and the kind of sensitivity as a woman with addiction and ADHD, sometimes I just think, God, I'm not able for this.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know,
Yeah.
that's, you know,
I,
that I'm,
I, I get that. It's when we stop drinking, we have to learn to manage the symptoms, don't we?
yeah.
Like the anxiety, and even if you have a really bad day or some bad news,
Mm,
your default brain can go to, I know what a fix is. Do you know what I mean? Like within seconds. Like I used to get in and pour a large glass of vodka, and
mm,
I used to say, look at it and go, I love you, and then I used to say, see you later, reality. Like I had this whole thing, like these catchphrases that I would say, and I would neck it, and it was like a burning warm feeling going down my gullet, and I felt instantly better. So no wonder so
yeah,
many people struggle so much to
yeah.
say, do you know what? Remove that now because it's really no good for you, and manage your feelings after that. It's really hard, isn't it?
It's really hard. And I think that thing is why a lot of people can't stay sober, because it's like, it's, I mean, it had to basically kill me nearly for me to admit, for me to get through that denial that it was a problem, because I was so full of this story that it wasn't, like, it was my circumstances, you know, or I kept thinking, I've got an anxiety disorder. What I will do is I will get medication for that anxiety disorder, and then I will be able to drink like a lady. I didn't connect to the dots. And I hear that so much
Yeah,
in meetings of, like, not being able to understand our own behavior. And then someone saying, I mean, what happened to me is that a therapist said to me, oh, I know what's wrong with you. Once I told her how I drank, she said, oh, you're an alcoholic.
oh,
And it's good news is that I know that there are people that get better, you know, and it'll be fine. She was really sort of like, oh, this is great, we know what's wrong with you. And that helped me, that I thought, oh, okay, maybe that is what's wrong with me, you know. But it was not, that first bit, it was hell.
mm,
Like, putting down that medicine and just being in the world, it was like the edges were too sharp, the lights were too bright. I was looking at, this is a real problem of mine, this compare and despair thing, like looking at the outsides of other people and thinking, like, how are they just on the tube, like people in the rush hour with a coffee,
yeah,
dressed for work, getting on the tube. I'd be like, how are you doing that? How? I can't even, like, I can't, I was, you know, crippling panic attacks, like terrible kind of IBS, like stressy kind of stomach, all of that, and no substance
yeah.
to, it was agony. And I
Yeah.
don't, you know, and actually I'm grateful for it now, because I think, I don't know if I could do that again. I don't know if I could do it again. So you know, I'm so grateful that I knew that I couldn't drink. Like it just became painfully obvious.
Yeah.
I am
And
not
do you know what?
someone.
That's half the battle, right, Rachel? Because when you dabble with the devil and you're going, like I see how it goes for a few months and then I might be able to moderate.
Yeah.
Well, we know where that goes, right? And there's that saying that I've often said, you can turn a cucumber into a pickle, but you can't turn it back. And
Yes.
and that's how I look at my
That's,
relationship with it, right? And I know that I just can never drink ever again. And
yeah.
I've worked with so many people now and talked to so many people that they felt after 3, 4 months, oh, I think I'm all right now. I'm not as bad as what I thought. They get fading by as effect, they forget how bad it was. And they then one night they go, do you know what? I had a glass of wine and I stopped at two. I think I've cracked it. And within a month, they're back to the 1 or 2 bottles a night, and it's got you around the throat again. So I agree with you. It's coming out that denial stage of thinking I'm allergic to alcohol. I cannot have it in my life. And when I made that a non-negotiable,
Yes.
kind of made it simpler for me
Yes.
to accept.
There's something really maddening about the negotiation. I spent a long time. I had a relapse after 7 months, and that entire 7 months, I'd be sitting in meetings, and my head would just be so busy, and it'd be listening to other people and being like, "I never did that. I never did that. I'm not like you." Like I was trying. I was in the negotiation stages,
Yeah,
and then it took a relapse where I drank a bottle of vodka. I just thought where I was like, oh, I am actually powerless over this. Like I have got
yeah,
no control. And I haven't had to have a drink since then. And actually the date that happened, I've got it tattooed on my forearm here. It's like, it's, it's so precious to me
yeah,
that day, that's the day that I kind of got real, you know?
yeah. You
Um,
dumped the toxic ex and you saw him for what it was. Do you know what I
yes,
mean? And
yeah,
I try and humanize my relationship with alcohol, and it helps me.
I bet.
Um, it does because it was a narcissist. It used to charm me,
Yeah,
woo me over when I was lonely, bored, hungry, upset, or if I'd had a really good day, it used to tap me on the shoulder. Let's celebrate, yay!
yeah,
All that stuff.
yeah,
And now it's still around, pops up every now and again, but it hasn't got the same effect. It's like seeing an ex from years ago, and you think, I don't know why I was with him in the first place. Do you know what I mean? It's worn off. But
yeah,
when you stopped drinking, then um, and you started playing,
yeah.
how was that experience? Like, you know,
Well, I didn't for the first year. I was a temp. My first year of recovery from the date of this tattoo, which is the 23rd of October 2007. I I was a temp in the parking permit department of Wandsworth Borough
oh
Council.
wow, I know
Again.
it.
Oh yeah, I bet you do. I bet you've had to deal with them. Yeah. And even getting there on the bus in the morning, I'd have to ring my sponsor and be like, can't stay on the bus. I mean, it was like that, like minute to minute. And that's why it's interesting what you were saying about I it's a non-negotiable. I can never drink again. There's a weird thing of like knowing that you can never drink again, but then I had to do the thing of the 12-step thing of it's just for today. I only have to bear this for today,
Yeah,
because if I looked at the kind of
too
vista
far.
me, it was like a tundra. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was too big. So my sponsor would be like, just get to work. Just get in, just walk into the office, get yourself a cup of tea, sit at your desk. Like I was literally incremental kind of. And I did that for long enough that I stopped having to think about it. And then whilst I was temping, a really close friend of mine who I've known since I was 8, and she was actually the person that she was instrumental in me stopping drinking. She rang my parents and told them what was going on. And the next thing I knew, my dad was coming to pick me up, and getting me to a therapist. And then so she was instrumental in my recovery. But she's a violinist, and she said, "There's this girl wants to form a quartet. She's a composer. She wants to arrange her own music, and not play like classical music. What do you think?" And it was just kind of a really nice way of getting back into
mm,
performing again. And We wrote all our own arrangements. We wore what we wanted. We were very lucky in that we got a kind of management deal with with a bloke that manages like lots of kind of classical crossover singers. So like within a year, we were playing at the London Palladium, our own arrangements, our own, you know, and it was, and I was with these 4 girls who kind of had my back, you know, and actually I was with 3 girls. I was one of the 4 girls. And it was really hard, and I'm really grateful to them because they had to put up with me and my neurosis, you know, because I was really fucking uncomfortable. I was really uncomfortable. And it was not the traditional trajectory that I thought I'd be on. I still have to make peace with the fact that I'm not in the London Symphony Orchestra, and I'm not, you know, like that kind of playing is not, it doesn't suit me and my nervous system. So it's much better for me to be thrashing out a kind of Nigel Kennedy-esque,
Yeah.
you know, Vivaldi at the front of a stage. That's much more my thing. So we toured, and like, you know, I had so many firsts with that quartet, you know, like the first time I got on a plane sober, which was awful. But then was all right, you know, and then it was all right. The first time, like, I went to all different countries, went to Japan and Mexico, and I went to meetings in all those places, and, you know, I stayed sober, and it was hard because they drank, not alcoholically, but there was drink. And at first that was very hard. I think it was like, the thing is, I knew that their drinking and my drinking were like completely unrelated. You know, they wanted to have a glass of wine after a concert and unwind a bit. And like, that is nothing to do with how I drank, like
No,
nothing, you
no.
know, like that. I'd have had to drink to go on the stage, to get on the train, to go to the gig, you know. So it wasn't that. It was just, I envied them, their ability to kind of like let their hair down afterwards. And I was just like wound up with all the adrenaline on a tour bus or on a, and that was quite hard. That was quite lonely sometimes. But they were incredibly supportive, and they were really encouraging, and we did some massive things. Like we were played live on Radio 2. We played as soloists with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. We traveled the world. Like, we had an amazing time. And then that ended, and I'd started doing kind of session playing by then, like a lot of kind of studio work. And I just got more and more comfortable with being uncomfortable. What I wish I could say is that, you know, I had an epiphany and I thought, I don't have to be frightened anymore and everything. It's not been like that. It's like my recovery has been slow, and it's been about sitting with discomfort and actually being able to get to a point where I can trust myself to not medicate it. And obviously the first bit of that was terrible. Like,
Yeah.
you know, but then so many things have happened. You know, I feel like my whole adult life's been in recovery. I'm like, so I came in when I was 23, now I'm nearly 40. And I've got married and divorced in that time. I've had 2 children. Being pregnant, that was, for someone who like is panicking about their body, that was quite hard. Giving birth, you know, I've had all these like major milestones in my life, and I haven't had to pick up a drink. So now it doesn't occur to me to pick up a drink ever. Like, it literally, and I can be around it. It doesn't have any effect on me. But the thing that I envy in people drinking is the ability to change their chemistry. That's the thing. Because, you know, some days I'm really nervous at work, or I'm stressed about my kids, or I'm exhausted, and I feel like I'd love to change how I feel. That's why people drink. Alcoholics drink because they want to change how they feel, and it works. We're clever. Have you ever met an alcoholic that wasn't really intelligent? Like, you
Yeah.
know. You have? Okay.
But
But
there are
I'm,
not many. We are very adaptable.
yeah,
We're
resourceful.
resilient,
Exactly.
you
Yeah,
know.
we're capable alcoholics. Like, and I see sober alcoholics do incredible things, like
Yeah.
massive
Yeah.
things. Um, you know, and helping other people, and a kind of, you know,
What I love, what I've picked up on is that you growing up, you were always looking for external validation,
Yeah,
right? And
definitely.
when we stop,
Yeah.
um, we start to get to know ourselves. But when we're drinking, we don't really know who we are, do we? And for
No.
me, when I was 14, when I started drinking, I gave up at 54, right?
Yeah, that's
It's
a long
like, yeah, 40 years, but I
time.
had 10 years of drinking a litre of vodka a night. So
Yeah.
I have no idea how I'm here. And I've interviewed people since and seen documentaries of people who have
Mm.
died in their early 40s who drank less than me.
Yes.
So I'm so lucky to be here now.
Mm.
Um, but we almost have to grow up. We
Yes.
have to accept our responsibilities, and we have to learn about ourselves, how we are. So you suffer with debilitating anxiety. So it's about you learning how to manage that on a physical and psychological level as well.
Yes.
And that takes a lot of time. But there are days, as you say, that you wake up and you think, I feel really, really anxious. And that could be a physical thing. And you could go for a walk, you could take vitamin D spray, B12, you can do all the right things and you still feel bloody anxious, right? And sometimes you just have to get through the day and go, do you know what? I'm going to bed at 7 o'clock
Mhm.
and that's the end of it and start
Yeah,
again.
absolutely. And but the other thing that in on those days, and there are those days, is that I do have like I've got like sober comrades, that I call and I can say to them, "Oh my God, I
Mm,
feel this, I'm thinking this." And no one ever goes, "What?" They
yeah,
all say, yeah, yeah, I know that. And they'll give me an example of when they've done that, or they just remind me who I am and what I'm capable of. And I have to have myself reflected back by someone else. And I think, you know, obviously I'm in 12-step recovery, so there's sponsorship. And sometimes on those days I sponsor people and they call me and they need my perspective, you
yeah,
know. Um, and that kind of gets me out of myself.
mm,
It's amazing because so much of what I'm fascinated by anything sort of like neurosciency.
mm,
I can't believe how what I can create with my own mind in my body, basically. Like so much of what I thought were like bodily complaints were sort of psychosomatic that
yeah,
you know, I'd processed trauma in my gut, for instance,
yeah,
and understanding how I'd done that, why I'd done that, meant that I could relax about it, which meant that my gut problems improved. But we're talking like that's a long time in recovery, even to uncover
mm,
why it was there in the first place. And I think most first sponsor used to say that alcoholism is a disease of impatience. And I really, really relate to that. It's like, I can't bear this. I'm going to change it right now. I'm
yeah,
going to change it, have a drink right now, because I can't see this feeling through to the end and see
yeah,
what it's going to evolve into, see where I'm going to be at the other end of it. I have to interrupt that cycle and control it myself. So it's like this kind of the controlling nature, and it's funny because like people would look at an alcoholic drunk and think, oh, they don't care, like, or they're really laid back, but it's like the opposite is true. It's
yeah,
like, no, I'm like absolutely full of self-centered fear, and I need to medicate it right this second. So much of my recovery has just been about just knowing that I can withstand difficult feelings. I
mm,
can,
yeah.
like, and it's
You've adapted over
yeah,
time, and it
yeah,
takes time. And I
it,
really get what you say about the impatience, right? Because being all or nothing,
yeah,
being overthinkers,
yes,
is like I want this done now. And that's why I think a lot of people when they stop drinking, they join a gym and they run marathons and that, but it always bites you on the arse after, right? Because we've gone too fast.
yes,
And it's like, okay, what about the emotional side and the like the scars it's left, the shame, the regret from the past, and it all catches up with you. And I always say, let's just take the day at a time thing, whether you're in 12 steps or not, is
yeah,
such a brilliant way to do it because it's like I do it either way. Wake up in the morning and say, right, absolutely non-negotiable, I'm not drinking today.
mhm,
Non-negotiable, so it plants that seed in your head. Or
yes,
you can say, when my head next touches that pillow
mhm,
in my bed, well, not all the time because you might have a kip, but I will be sober. And that's what you've got to aim for, you know. And it works because so many people, I can't see me lasting the weekend. I can't baby steps from the beginning.
Yeah, I remember saying on my first meeting to this woman, I was like, if I get married, I won't be able to have champagne at my wedding.
Yeah.
You know, she was like, but you've had a bottle of vodka in your handbag. Like, are you engaged? I was like, no.
I haven't even met him yet. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's like the projection is mad. But it's interesting as well what you were saying there about the thing about, right, I'm going to stop drinking and then I'm going to run a marathon and kind of do the full gamut. And I think so much of like being sober and like just accepting life on life's terms, you know, is like sometimes life's boring. Like there's
Yeah,
mundane shit to do. Like I'm a mother of two. There's a lot of my life is not playing with rock stars in studios or on stage. It's like folding laundry for my 6-year-old
yeah,
or wiping bottoms or knit combing or, you know, like the stuff of life, like the mundane stuff,
yeah.
the school run, like being in Sainsbury's thinking about what everyone needs to eat the next day, like that kind of stuff, that minutiae was completely beyond me when I was drinking. I just could, it was like, that's so boring. I can't even think about it. So I'll just starve. So I will still just be nothing in my fridge. Like I didn't understand about like, you know, self-care and kind of showing up for yourself. And now I've got to show up for 2 children and the days are long, you know. Um, and lots has to happen even before they go to school or before I go to work. And I think sitting with the kind of the mundane stuff and the boring stuff of life, like that's, you get promised like a full life with all the feelings, not just the
Mm.
kind of extreme good ones. It's like there's stuff that's in the middle, the kind of meh days.
Yeah, I really relate to that.
Yeah.
And you know, the ups and downs of life, relationships, separations,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, change of job, moving house, all those really big stressful situations. And I think it's you adapt over time, you get used to it.
Yes.
And I think that's why making it a non-negotiable saves a lot of time actually,
Yeah.
because you can just say, right, it's done now, and that's the end of it. And have closure over it.
Oh, you not think like once you've like kept that boundary for yourself, it's like you can trust yourself
Yeah.
more and more as time goes on. Like the more days that you do of like, I'm not going to drink today, and then you've done a month,
Mm.
you know, it means that you are, because I don't know about you, but when I was drinking, I couldn't show up where I said I was going to show up. I was unreliable largely. Like I couldn't, my behavior didn't match my words. You know,
Yeah, and I think
the,
you're unreliable to yourself as well.
well, that's what, yeah, that's what I mean.
You
Like,
know, like you're not living up to your core values where you think you're this person, and then all of a sudden you don't act like that, that's where there's shame. It's like, who am I? Who have I become? And that's how I felt. You just look in the mirror and compare. Like there was a lot of comparison you were saying about when you were younger.
mhm,
And I also say, like, try not to compare to other people when they're sober because it's a completely bespoke relationship to every single individual who struggles with alcohol, right?
yeah,
Because you could drink one bottle of wine a night. Well, all right, let's use vodka, right? Let's be real. You could drink a bottle of vodka a night. I drink a bottle of vodka a night. But we've had different backgrounds, different upbringings with different people.
yeah,
So it's bespoke to yourself. So when we both, oh, we're both going to give up at the same time on the same day, we're going to react differently. So it's how we deal with our life, managing our life
mm,
without that medication.
yeah,
Um, but I agree with you. It's being patient. Education is huge. Like you said about neuroscience, I'm fascinated by that. I love about the neurotransmitters and how our brain works and the repair process, and our bodies are incredible as well. You know how we can repair a positive mindset. Don't be a victim where we're like, oh, why can't I be like everyone else? We're not, and we never will be. And that's the end of it. I know that sounds harsh, but when you actually frame it like that, it's the truth.
yeah.
So you don't start going, maybe I can have one, because deep down we know we can't. And that's how I look at it, you know?
I think. the comparison thing, that was a real, you know, being in the classical music industry, and I'm surrounded by people kind of high achieving, you know, people that are incredible musicians. And I used to say to my sponsor at, you know, when I was temping and trying to show up to work without having a panic attack, and I'd look at the other musicians and I'd say to her, like, I'm not like them. She said, well, it's pointless you even looking at those people. Like, the only comparison you should be making is the person that came through the doors of, you know, recovery. That's the person that you should be comparing
Mm,
yourself to. You were somebody who couldn't get in the shower without having a drink of vodka, and who was not living in reality, and now you're someone that's trying.
yeah,
So it's absolutely irrelevant what those other people are doing. Irrelevant to you. Like, you are not in the same parameters as them,
yeah,
because you drink vodka like all day if left unchecked. So that was a really good reality check for me as well. So I can still fall into that trap now of comparison. And I think, you know, Instagram and things like that, like, it just breeds that, you know, my body should look like this, I should have this, all of that stuff. And it can be such a trap that
mm,
I'm actually really grateful that I've got that my parameters are like, well, I'm somebody that was, you know, nearly dead from alcoholism. And
yeah.
now I'm a working, you know, mother of two, sober. So my comparison has to be a bit different than it.
Absolutely. And what is alcoholism like in your industry? Because you mentioned earlier how, like, these difficult keys. You look at rock bands, and you know, I interviewed Jim Sonefeld from Hootie and the Blowfish, and it kind of enhanced their music. It was accepted that it's rock and roll, and throwing tellies out the window and that. And like, is it rife in your industry?
I'll say it is, Dave. Yes, it is. It is. But well, then I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? I think it's rife,
Everywhere.
petty. You
It
know,
is.
but it's interesting because you know, how we've been connected is through the charity that I'm a
Mm,
trustee of, which is music support, right?
mm,
And that was set up by people in the music industry for people in the music and live events industry. And I'm the only one on that board of trustees at the moment that's from the classical world. The other chaps are from the rock and roll world, where
mm.
it does seem like to me it's way more acceptable to have to admit to emotional frailty, or to get sober and stay sober and be clean. And it's like, and it's a kind of a thing. A lot of people are sober and clean in that industry now. In my industry, people do not talk about this very much. And I think, like anything, I mean, yeah, it is rife. It is rife. There's a culture of beta blockers. That's a big thing, which, you know, I can be on the fence about, because I guess they're not mind altering as such, but people rely heavily on those drugs to get them through performance anxiety, which, you know, if, for instance, if you're a string player and you're awash with adrenaline, you can get what's called the bow shakes and the sweat, and it can stop you from delivering the performance of the music that you've worked so hard on. You can get nervous and mess it up. So, like, to bypass that chemistry, you can take a beta blocker, and you still have all the nerves and the fear in your mind, but your body just goes, everything's fine.
Ah,
See, that's what so it blocks adrenaline. That's how, but it also means that you feel kind of dead. I can't take those, even though they're not like addictive, because I have been addicted to them. So when I got sober, I had to put those down. But the culture of like taking beta blockers and not telling people that you're taking beta blockers is massive. And
wow.
then there's the drinking. I mean, I work in the West End primarily and on recording sessions. And yeah, it's very different now than it was even maybe like 5 years ago. It's much sort of less boozy, I'd say. But it's like anything else, isn't it? It's like people want to get through a difficult situation, so they
Mm,
medicate themselves through it. What I wish in my industry is that we all know that we're frightened, because it's a frightening thing. I've mentioned, you know, that feeling of being on the stage, sweating, you know, with a frock on, and in a silent auditorium, playing very, very difficult music. There are some people that aren't frightened of that and just like see it as a joyful
yeah.
expression, and they just want to be part of something. And I also experience that in recovery often. But it's like, it's still, I feel very much like it's still a taboo subject. And it's funny, I did a podcast recently, like a musicians podcast, and they said, we Googled orchestral musicians and performance anxiety, and you're the only result that comes up that's talking about it. So I mean, things are definitely changing. Like, I've started going into conservatoires and talking to the students, like in Freshers Week,
Wow,
and
that's really
saying,
brilliant.
yeah, so the culture's definitely changing
Yeah.
educationally, but I still feel a bit of an outlier talking about it, to be honest. And I'm sure, and I don't know, I just wish that we could all, it was more acceptable to say, I'm really scared.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
powerful actually. That's really powerful because we're afraid of judgment, aren't we?
Yeah.
I spoke to someone the other day whose husband didn't want to go into hospital because he didn't want to be judged by the nurses and doctors because of his alcoholism, and it broke my heart.
That,
And he didn't make it
oh,
in
I'm
the end,
sorry.
and they're the kind of stories like, God, why is there still stigma
Yeah.
wrapped around this terrible illness? Why, if we say to people, I'm giving up sugar, or I'm not having caffeine, or I'm trying to stop smoking, it's like, fantastic. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm trying not to drink. Oh, don't be boring.
Oh God, I know.
Yeah,
You know,
and or there's nothing wrong with your drinking. You're okay. Have a drink. All this business, like, and what about my mental health? What about my anxiety? Like my everyday life of trying to manage. What about that? Does that not mean anything to you? Like it's such.
I think it shows up other people. I remember, it's so funny when I tell people I'm sober, the people that are like desperate to tell me about their own drinking and how okay it is, there's people are like, oh, well, I don't drink like that. And immediately, and I
Yeah,
think, oh, okay, something's going on there for that
yeah,
person.
yeah.
So I think sober people kind of can be mirrors for people that,
Absolutely.
and it makes people uncomfortable. There's
Yeah,
that. But then again, I do, I'm sometimes like, I have the honor and the privilege of being the person that people ring when they're ready to stop,
yeah,
you know, and that has happened a few times, people that I've worked for, people that I would never have thought, that are like bossing it career wise, and incredible musicians. And then I've had a phone call saying like, oh my God, like my drinking is out of control. I need some help, and if I didn't talk about it and I wasn't open about it, then they wouldn't know that I was there, that I've been through it. So I think that's the reason, we can't smash any stigmas if you're not talking about it, but then it costs something, doesn't it,
yeah,
to
yeah.
be vulnerable, open, and to be open. And sometimes I worry about my parents, like because I think it must be quite hard for them, that I think they wonder if it was their fault, because there wasn't alcoholism in my family. And that, the people that got me sober was like a room full of strangers. It wasn't people that loved me at the time,
Mm.
which is that's another kind of strange paradox about getting sober in the 12-step recovery, is that, you go into a room full of strangers, and it's like, there you can be honest, or
Mm.
that was my experience anyway. I know that's not everybody's experience, but I felt very like, oh, I can stop pretending in here. I can say, like, I heard people talk about fear, and I've been afraid my whole life, and I couldn't understand why people weren't saying, oh my God, I'm so frightened, this is so frightening. And I still don't understand that. Like, I find small talk really hard. you know what I love about sitting next to someone in a meeting is, you'll say, how are you, and they'll go, fucking, I've had a shit,
Terrible.
terrible,
Yeah,
I'm scared, I've had a row with my partner,
yeah,
I hated my boss today. And it's like, then I feel like they're lighter, I feel less alone in my struggle, because it is a struggle being a human at that,
yeah.
living a life. It's hard. And you know the community of sober people is really important as well, whether you do it through meetings or whatever, just to kind of,
Absolutely. Connection is key.
yeah,
And there's like, and I always say it's like an unspoken code when you know that someone's been in the same boat. It's like the Mason's handshake. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah. I relate, and you know, you could say to me about drinking vodka out of a bottle of like water. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, you know,
Decanting like Aldi or other supermarket. I shouldn't say a supermarket name, should I? But like, terrible sort of paint stripper vodka.
yeah, like own brand, like
Own brand.
£7 a bottle vodka.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Which I knew was going to make me ill,
yeah.
but that was still preferable to
Oh
like
yeah,
think,
you don't think of
yeah,
the after, you think about the here and now. And I need to take
thinking about
this, yeah,
sensations.
this
Yeah,
instant fix. But it's interesting what you say about your mum and dad, because I often work with partners of alcoholics, and they come to me and they literally don't know what to do,
yeah,
and they can get dragged down as
yeah,
well, to the depths, right? And Music Support, who are a fantastic charity, and I've had Andy Franks on my podcast,
yeah.
who is amazing, Franksy, and he's a tour manager who's worked with literally everyone, isn't he?
Have.
And they've just launched a family and friends service, haven't they?
They
I
have.
think was last week, which I think is really, really important. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, we've got a partnership with a new foundation called the Christopher Meredith Foundation, and he was a well-loved agent and festival booker, and he sadly died by suicide. But his foundation do a lot of amazing work in the music industry, and it's enabled Music Support because we often have had calls on our helpline, which we run from sort of desperate families and friends of alcoholics. And I think when an alcoholic is in the mire of the addiction, we become incredibly like myopic and selfish, and we behave badly. And but I think the people that love us can see the person underneath and want that person back and don't know what to do. So it's really important that they have some support as well, just to kind of know what to say, what to do, what not to do. Um, so we're really passionate about that, because we're contacted a lot by tour managers of artists, for instance, of people that are struggling.
Yeah.
So that's what that we're going to have a dedicated helpline for friends and family, and then we can direct those people to wherever the help is, basically.
Signpost them, which is really
Yeah,
important, because um, knowing the right avenue is so important, isn't it?
yeah,
Because, you know, uh, they're at a loss. That, you know, as you say, so articulate what you said there about they want their person back, whether
yeah,
it's a loved one, sibling, colleague.
yeah,
They want that person back, because, as the alcoholics have said, we get lost in the mire, don't we? And we just can't see wood out the trees, you know, through the trees. So it's so important for people to have support outside of friends that's giving the wrong advice, you know.
yeah,
Like, just boot him out, or, you know,
yeah.
it's,
Hide the booze. That's another one.
oh yeah, don't pour the booze down the sink.
Yeah, but also there's something about that person gets then enmeshed with the illness, which isn't
Mm,
their illness. So then
mm,
codependency becomes a problem. So it's really far reaching, and it's a family illness, but it's
yeah,
also a family recovery. Like, amazing things happen. The ripple effect of getting sober
yeah,
is massive as well. So there's hope there, but
yeah,
it's really difficult. And the thing is, it's such a shame, because when we're in addiction, we're assholes. That's the problem. Like, it's hard to, it looks like willful behavior, doesn't it? I think what I wish people that, like, in general, like, and even as far as like the National Health Service, understood the concept of powerlessness. Like, an alcoholic often looks like they're drinking because they want to drink, but it's
yeah,
not a choice anymore. And I
yeah,
think we cross a line where it's no longer a choice whether we pick up that drink or not, but we're still working under the illusion, the delusion, that it is a choice. And I think that's very, very hard for someone who isn't an alcoholic to understand. I think that's really, really hard, because it just looks like bad behavior, or
mm,
like incredible selfishness. And it's like, actually, I desperately did not want to be someone who was drinking vodka. Like, I didn't go to the Royal Academy of Music and practice all my life to be in a toilet on the Vauxhall roundabout decanting Aldi vodka into a water bottle. That's not who I wanted to be. But I had no other resources. Like, and I have to kind of look at that girl with compassion now, but it's taken me ages.
Yeah.
It's really, and actually I thought it was a real cop out when I went into recovery and people said, well, you're powerless over this, you've got a disease. And I'd be like, what a crock of shit that is. I'm a
Yeah.
bad person. And if I was a better person and a stronger person, I wouldn't have to do this. I'd be more resourceful. I'd be stronger. And actually it wasn't until I relapsed and I understood that, yes, indeed I was powerless, that I could start getting better. I could, because as soon as I had this illusion of like control, like and actually once I surrendered to the fact that there was no control, like I'd crossed the line years ago and I was never going to uncross it, then I could start recovering. But it like the journey from from making that discovery, a lot of people never get there. They never make that bit of the journey where they're like, oh God, I'm powerless over this and I could do something else instead. Because you've got to smash through layers of denial and all sorts and stigma and the whole, it's a fucker. It really is.
Well, Rachel, I don't think you need to play the cello to be able to give me goosebumps, because you articulated that so perfectly.
Oh,
So thank you for that, because it was put so perfectly.
thank you.
And there's a lot of us that are really, really, really understand that. That, the judgment that we get because we do this. Well, don't drink then. And no wonder he died.
Yeah.
That kind of statement, and
Have
he brought it on
one.
himself.
Yeah.
You know,
All of that.
uh, all of it. So thank you for that. And as I always say, this is one for the road, and I try and keep them within an hour because people have them on their car,
Yeah.
at the gym, going for walking the dog and that. But I did want to just talk about who you've played with, like London Grammar, right? I read that now. Oh my God, they are literally one of my favourite bands. And on there, yeah, I absolutely love London Grammar. And they played a part of my recovery as well, because I listen to music a lot with my headphones on, and it stops the noise. It's one of my coping strategies. It's like diverting the overthinking, right? And
Yes.
they've had so many amazing albums, but the Californian Soil one, when they had musicians in, the video was so emotional. And I'm wondering whether you was one of those people in the video, because
I wasn't in
um
the video. I was in, what did I do on the colourful? They did like a live thing in Ali Pali where they made Ali Pali like a beautiful rainforest, and we played.
yeah, I that's
I
the
can't
one I
remember.
think
Is that
I'm
the one?
talking
Yeah, that was
about.
the
Yeah.
thing. Yeah,
Oh,
that was.
was it? That was so brilliant.
I love.
Honestly.
I've got such a place in my heart for London Grammar because I toured with them on a bus when I was pregnant with my son. And
Wow.
touring on a bus sober is already quite difficult, but they are such lovely humans, and they were always really supportive about me
Yeah.
being in recovery and getting to meetings and things. And they were just, yeah, they're lovely people. But her voice though, right?
Hannah Reid, her voice is like
I know,
angelic, isn't it?
I know.
It's
They're really talented. They're lovely. I love them.
and so there's that. And I mentioned Pink Floyd
Oh,
earlier.
that's a
So
dream.
what are you doing next month?
Next month, playing with, I don't know if I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about
Or
it yet.
maybe not then.
Although I don't, maybe they started advertising it. I'm not sure.
I
And
don't know.
there
We can.
may be a little project in the pipeline of doing Darker Side of the Moon with Roger Waters at the Palladium with a very small acoustic setup. So I'm gonna do that
Oh,
with
that
Frank.
is incredible.
Yeah. So
Is
that
that
will,
Franksy boy going to be
yeah.
there?
Franksy Boy will be there. Yeah.
I'll have to have a word
Running
with him.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. Oh, I'm so genuinely pleased you've managed to sort things out and life looks good for you now, even though it has ups and downs. It's the reality, isn't it? And
Yes.
I'm so grateful you joined me today, because it's been a brilliant interview. You've been so articulate. I'm really grateful to you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. You're
Thank
doing
you
amazing
so
things.
much.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.